Gonna paint the famous Rough Rider skull today on some Arches 140 cold press paper. I know one of these books has this design in it. It's like the classic tattoo stencils from Cliff White. It has a clean acetate of the Rough Rider skull. Cliff White's released a couple books of parts of his collection of acetate stencils. This one's a pretty good deal. It's got maybe 1,000 designs in it. He owned Cliff's Tattoo in Center Reach, New York since 1989, and I believe his son's taken over the business. He's got quite the collection. Just kind of sitting up my work area here. I like using these porcelain ink caps. Generally prefer a nib. Black ink kind of comes and goes. There's different brands that work nicely. But this is just transferred with Syrah paper on a block of Arches 140 cold press. It's a 9x12 block. But painting this kind of has me curious about the origins of the design. We always hear Tony Polito. Heard a couple other names like Tom Berg. Where does it actually come from? Was it a Coleman design? Let's kind of dig into this a little bit. I want to paint this thing, see if we can come up with something. If you know anything, feel free to let me know. I'm always curious to learn more. Still just kind of lining this guy out. I think I got a B5.5 in this thing with the nib holder I made. Feels pretty good. Should make quick work of it. So this image really took off in the 1960s after Tony Polito made it kind of a notoriously famous image, but we'll get more into that later. Now, did he invent the design? I'm not so sure. You kind of see it come up with other tattooers like Cap Coleman, Bert Grimm, Huck Spalding, Paul Rogers. I've even seen claims and a photograph attributed to Tom Burt labeled 1910, which predates this image quite a lot, as it looks like their original origin may come from 1937. So after a little digging, we go back to 1937. We have Death on a Dude Ranch by Frances Bonamy. The author, her real name was Audrey Waltz. She used this male-sounding pen name just because it was a kind of a sign of the times, as hard-boiled crime fiction was often marketed to men. Women often used pseudonyms to be published and taken seriously. This pen name kind of functioned as market access. Who would have guessed her book would be so much worth so much today? Now, as much as I'd like to read this book, the price is pretty hefty and I can't seem to find a digitized version of it. So here's a quick synopsis of Death on a Dude Ranch. It's a hard-boiled crime novel set against the backdrop of a western dude ranch, where vacationers and working hands collide when a murder disrupts the ranch. The story follows an investigation that peels back a romantic image of the West to reveal greed, deception, and violence underneath. The ranch meant to sell freedom and adventure, kind of like the movie City Slickers is what this sounds like. Becomes a closed world where outsiders, money, and hidden motives intersect. The tone is fatalistic. The West isn't a refuge. It's a stage where bad decisions catch up fast. Yeah, it totally sounds like City Slickers with some crime and edge. Kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting name when you look at it. Francis with an I is definitely a male spelling. And Bonamy in French means good friend. It's kind of a cool pen name. I've just about wrapped up the lines here. Not too many crazy mistakes. I did get one good smudge on there. But the Sorrel paper erases pretty easily in between now and shading. I do like using a combination of brushes for this part. This water brush is really nice for getting a really nice wet surface. I do like using a smaller ink brush and generally a filbert flat like number 6 for traditional kind of spit shading. Kind of gave up spit shading a while ago. It just doesn't seem as efficient as kind of flooding the paper with water first. Doing this flood painting, you can actually use a dry brush to pull the ink off the paper. So it makes it a little more forgiving and allows kind of larger gradients to happen. You can kind of see on this big hat part how it kind of floods out everywhere. Makes it real easy to undo and redo. I've probably done a couple thousand paintings with spit, but this is kind of where I'm at these days. Itself was illustrated by an artist called Walter Keith Frame, who lived from 1895 to 1957. He was a professional commercial illustrator active in New York. He was also an artist and he currently has a piece in the National Gallery of Art. It's a pretty neat look and style. But one of his side gigs was being employed by the Doubleday, Dorian and Company publisher, making covers for their crime novels. And later, Frances Bonami, or Bonami, I can't figure out how to say it, switched publishers, so she had to get new artists for her new covers. Another kind of confusing thing, looking up Walter Keith Frame, pulls up another artist from New York called Walter Frame, spelled differently, but he was a DC comic book artist around the same period of time, perhaps a little bit after him. So for some reason the online databases kind of seem to mix those two up to make the search a little confusing. But for this time period, it kind of seems highly unlikely that a commercial artist would reference an image from a tattoo artist from the earlier claims from Tom Berg. I'm not saying it's not possible. It just seems rather unlikely. The two worlds are pretty separated, but you never know. After talking to a few artists about the origins of Tom Berg, apparently he was an early UK tattooer who spent some time in California and San Francisco. So it is possible he may have shared this design with other tattooers like Cap Coleman or maybe Percy Waters, and it could have spread from there and had it start. But around the turn of the century there, this was a really popular motif in art, the kind of death noir stuff. This is using that flat filbert brush for shading. Kind of gets into all the nooks and crannies. So it all kind of loops back around to Tony Polito, who began tattooing in Brooklyn, New York in 1959. Interesting times, because he seemed to work almost his whole career under the New York City tattoo ban that went from 1961 to 1997. He owned a shop called Old Calcutta Tattoo on Lefferts Avenue in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. He simply refined this image into the classic image that we all know and love. And this is where the story gets a little crazy. Like Crazy Sal, Salvatore DeSarno. He had a prior conviction in 1978. He was convicted of armed robbery after robbing a 60-year-old woman at knife point. He was sentenced to 3 years and released early on parole in August of 1979. While on parole, under investigation for an armed robbery of a donut shop in Brooklyn, witnesses reported him brandishing a firearm in the days leading up to the incident. On January 28, 1980, DeSarno was stopped by Officer Cecil Sledge, a 12-year NYPD veteran. DeSarno shot Sledge 4 times with a .38 revolver. Sledge was wearing a bulletproof vest, which prevented immediate death from the gunfire. But then DeSarno fled in his car, running over Officer Sledge and dragging him several blocks. The dragging injuries were a major contributing cause of his death, despite the vest. In a pursuit, he crashed his car and fled into a stranger's home, took a woman hostage, and admitted out loud that he had killed a cop and demanded help. He eventually surrounded after the police surrounded the house. He was convicted, found guilty of murder, sentenced to 25 to life in 1981, and he's had multiple parole attempts, all denied, up to this day. There was a photo circulating in most of the papers of Crazy Sal with his shirt kind of open, and you could see the Rough Rider tattoo on his chest. I think this is kind of what immortalized the design. It's also worth saying that Tony Polito likely didn't love the name Crazy Sal. That name came from a murder, from headlines, not from tattooing. Calling it the Rough Rider kind of separates the image from the crime. It puts it back in the language of tattooing, symbolism, archetype meaning. There's no record of Polito naming it after Sal. I've actually read the opposite in some places. And everything about the name Rough Rider suggests distance, not endorsement. It is kind of weird how it can be kind of tied to a cab with association from the 1980 crime. But the design's from way before that, so it might be a reach. But the name Rough Rider kind of reframes this image as archetype immortality, not protest and ideology. But it could mean something different to everyone who wears it, so there's that. It is kind of interesting. Kind of random couple searches and talking to a couple people. These crazy stories pop up. If you got anything to contribute, feel free to let me know. I'd love to hear it. I am from the opposite coast, and I'm sure there's a lot better recounts of all this stuff, but I love getting into this. I'm also going to link another YouTube video that I found that was about the crimes of that time. It's like a crime page, but it's got a ton of information about Crazy Sal with a whole bunch of photos and images if you really want to dig into it a little bit. It's good stuff. So now that I almost got the shading wrapped up here, I think I'm kind of digging this nice simple look. Might do the unthinkable and stain it. I know I've talked about not staining things before, but it's a kind of moment to celebrate when you don't accidentally spill or smear on the paper. Though I did get one good smear in there. It seems to be pretty hidden at this point. I'm not really too fussy about the stained color. I'm just kind of dumping some brown and black into my rinse cup. See what kind of tone we can get out of it. You could use like antiquing solution or something, but I don't think it really matters that much as long as the painting is dry underneath. It's nothing worse than having pigment that isn't permanent or waterproof smear all over you. Had a couple bad experiences with that. Now I'm kind of trying something different with this video. We've been so programmed by short format social media. It's just trying to slow things down a bit and be a little calmer about things, since we seem to have all the time in the world on this platform. Let me know what you think of this layout, if it's worth doing more, or how you feel about the speed of it, or should I make it 60 seconds?